I'm proud to call myself a salesperson. That's what I do. I trade in the ancient art of the supply of goods, and, long may that continue. Yeah, I'm a great believer in, just say yes and then worry about how you're going to deliver it afterwards. And I sensed that we were going to be kidnapped if we carried on talking to these two guys that we hired that were I think they were special for, you never know, because I don't say a word. And I'm sure there was a gun somewhere in their pockets. Your reputation is not about your logo. It's not about what you say. It's about what people say about you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sales Cadence podcast. My name is Matt Sykes, and my guest today is Scott Russell. Scott is the co-founder of Paddy Scott's. Paddy Scott's is a global coffee brand created by Scott and his friend Paddy back in 2007, and today it is the recognised global brand that you see on the high street and you see in some of the largest retailers and restaurants around. One of the great things about Paddy Scott's is they continue to disrupt the coffee supply chain by championing the coffee farmer, and they cut out as many of the middlemen as they can so that more of the profit goes back to the people that matter most, and those people are the people that grow the coffee beans themselves, the farmers. Scott is a born entrepreneur. You'll hear that running right the way through the various different episodes of his journey that I take him on. He comes from a sales background. His parents were market traders in the East End of London, and that's where he learned his passion for selling, which he's taken right the way through his entrepreneurial journey. He's built and sold a number of companies, and together with his work at Paddy Scott's, he's involved with a number of businesses today. It's a fascinating episode. I think you're going to love it. I'm tempted to say go and grab yourself a coffee and settle in, but that would be far too predictable. So instead, let's just go with this. Cue the music. Scott Russell, welcome to the Sales Cadence podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Matt.
Thank you so much for getting some time in your diary to come and have this conversation. Really, really interesting background that I want to unpack for the listener. But for the benefit of the listener, let's just pretend, Scott, you're chatting to a complete stranger at some event somewhere, and they say to you, okay, so what do you do? What do you tend to reply?
That's a great question. Obviously, at the moment, I run a UK coffee brand, but normally I'd say, look, I build things and I sell things that people want to buy. And when I say want to buy, there's a big difference between selling something that people buy, and there's a massive difference from creating a brand that people want to buy. So I've been fortunate over the last 30 years to build products that people want to buy, and there is a difference. So I'm a salesman. That's what I do.
Let me take you right back to the start, because what I quite like to do really is give the listeners some background to Scott. And so I don't know if you can remember that far. We're of a similar age, I think. We're both over 50, but both looking good for it, I hasten to add. If I take you right back to your sort of final year in high school, Scott, so I don't know, 15, 16 years old, something really weird happened called a careers advice lesson. I don't know if you remember it. Some weird guy from the council would have turned up who had no idea what careers were. And he probably asked you the question, so what do you want to be when you grow up? Do you remember that? And if so, do you remember what you wanted to be when you were 15 or 16 years old?
Yeah, look, I always wanted to work for myself. And I think, years ago, back in the sort of late 80s when I left school, that wasn't an answer. They tried to sort of pigeonhole you into a manual blue-collar job, because I went to a pretty basic school, and I didn't really understand what university meant. My parents were quite entrepreneurial. They were market traders, and I think that I just knew that if I could buy something for £1 and sell it for £2, I could make margin on that. And I understood the idea of margin and profit, even at a young age. So, when I kept saying to my careers officer, look, I just want to work for myself, I think they sort of said to me, they put me into a solitary role. And I think that I was, they wanted me to be a car mechanic, working on my own as a mechanic, which, I love cars and, I think it's a great job. But I don't think my teachers really understood the entrepreneurial spirit that was embedded in this young 15-year-old disruptive child.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me for a minute. It's almost like being at the football where you decide to hand a transfer in and you have to go and train with the 21s. You can go over there, Scott. But what is this
Yeah,
entrepreneurial nonsense you speak of? Yeah,
yeah.
you touched on something there. I just want to have a little, bit of an explore around, which is your upbringing. Good childhood.
Mm, absolutely. So I come from a sort of East London family. And so my aunties, uncles were all used to work for themselves, whether that be market traders, whether that be buying and selling cars, and it was the norm to go to sort of family Christmas events and talk about profit and what they were doing and the market stalls they were building, and they all sort of wanted a shop, their own shop, or they wanted their own business. So, you say never talk politics or religion round a table, but that certainly wasn't the case with myself growing up. And my mum and dad were brilliant, actually, and they're still a massive part of my life now. And when things get a bit tight, I will ring my mum even now, and I'll say, "Look, mum, what do you think?" And she just gives honest, great advice. And she's an old war horse. She's still a commercial artist now, still selling her paintings and still doing really well, in her sort of early 70s. So growing up, making money was the norm, and talking about profit was exciting. And certainly, I grew up in that environment. So yeah, it was a very good environment, and I'm very proud of my upbringing.
And so that early experience of sort of East End market trading, do you remember making your first sale?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I was selling horse chestnuts. Well, I started when you're the son of market traders. Weekends you spent with your mum and dad, so it was the norm to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and then go off and help mum and dad on the market stalls. And eventually you get under their feet and they'd push you away and say, "Look, get under someone else's feet." And I sort of, my first job was selling horse chestnuts when I was about 12 years old, maybe a bit younger than that, about 10 years old. And I realised that I could get paid £10 a day, but if I bought my own horse chestnuts and I created my own brazier, then I could sell them myself. So at the age of 12, I invested in an oil drum, and I created my own little business selling horse chestnuts. And I
That is
and I, and
genius.
I did really well. And I remember sort of making sort of 30, £40. And this was back in sort of the early 80s, and that was the youth training scheme at the time. The YTS were paying apprentice sort of 27 coin, but 27 quid a week, and I could make £30, £40 on a Saturday selling horse chestnuts, and I was 12 years old. So no, I loved it. I loved it.
And then I did a little bit of due diligence, as you'd expect me to, and it looks like you had sort of intervention, if you like, with the jewellery world. Is that right?
I did, yeah, absolutely. So mum and dad said, "Look, Scott, you have to learn a trade." They were in the jewellery business, and so I managed to join the youth training scheme when I was 16. So I left school when I was 16. I didn't achieve any exams at all. Unfortunately, not because I wasn't. It just didn't work. It was during a time with the teacher strikes, and I was probably working when I shouldn't have been working, and I didn't really go back for any of my exams. But my parents got me an apprenticeship working in Hatton Garden as a jeweller's apprentice, and I managed to do 2.5 years working in Hatton Garden, and I got an internship to Sir John Cass College, where I studied gemology, jewellery design, horology, and business, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I sort of those were really informative 2 years of my life where I learned an awful lot about myself, actually.
That's really interesting, actually, because we both left secondary school. We were both, if you remember, we were both kicked out in Thatcher's Britain, weren't we? She was in charge,
Absolutely.
and it was very much about look, at university is this thing you can aspire to, but most people won't be able to afford it. So do yourself a favour, roll your sleeves up, get out there and find a job and go and contribute to society. It's sort of interesting how things go around in cycles, because we may need a little bit more of that today. But less of the political rant from me.
No, no,
More,
not at all, Matt. Not at all. Just to expand on that point, I've just built a house. I've designed a house and I built it, and I love it. And the money that I'm paying my electricians and my carpenters and the plumbers, and God forbid we talk about sort of electrical and data engineering. I think these guys by the hour charge more than my lawyers. So there is something to be said about sort of proper work, and kids aren't going into plumbing or electrical data engineering or bricklaying, but Christ almighty, the money that can be made if you're good at that, yeah. So anyway, don't get on my soapbox about
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
that. So we'll jump off that.
I don't think ChatGPT can change a tap washer, so I think there's definitely some
That's
trades out there that are going to be okay. So you go through your teenage years, you're into your early 20s, and I notice on your LinkedIn profile that you've created and sold a number of businesses. That's what you do. Age 24, you sold your first telecoms business. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I sort of, at 19 years old, realised that, I wasn't going to make any money in jewellery. And I spied this job in the Evening Standard on the train on the way home that said, do you want to earn 100 grand a year being a photocopier sales guy? And I remember thinking, yeah, I could do that. That's fantastic. I could sell photocopiers, 100,000. It's like £1 million a year. Let's do it. Let's go for that job. But I had none of the credentials. So it was a postgraduate degree job. It was working for a brand new business called Mercury Communications at the time. And you had to live inside the curtilage of London. And anyway, I didn't read any of that. All I saw was 100 grand. So I rung the free phone number and I said, look, I'm the best salesman you'll ever recruit, and I want to come and see you, and I'm trying to close the recruiter on the line. And he was like, look, Scott, you don't have to close me. He said, you've got to go. And anyway, so I remember turning up for this meeting, and I was completely out of my depth, but I marched across the sales team, and I had my granddad's tap dancing shoes. Long story, but I didn't have a suit at the time. I didn't need a suit. And so I bought this suit from Burton, 60 quid this suit cost me. It was ill-fitting. It hung off me, but I realised I didn't have a pair of shoes. My grandfather lent me a pair of tap dancing shoes, and I couldn't get the bloody Blakeys off the bottom. So I remember sort of walking across this sales floor in London, and I sounded like, Fred Astaire. And as I sort of sat down in front, I sort of picked and the guy said to me, have you got tap dancing shoes? I went, no, I haven't. He said, you have. And it sort of broke the ice. Anyway, I was ill qualified to do this job, but they said, look, we've got this thing called an OPC. It's and I said, well, that's a title. That's great. Can I still earn 100 grand doing it? And they said, no, you can't. What an OPC stands for is an outside people catcher. So I was standing outside Commercial Street in East London with a clipboard, trying to capture people's names and addresses to then give that to a salesperson. And I remember sort of thinking, I didn't want to give it to a salesperson because I built up this rapport with this person on the street. Cut a very long story short, that's how I got into telecoms. Through being an OPC for Mercury Communications.
There's nothing like going up to a complete stranger to try and have a conversation to create really good thick skin and sales skills, is there? I mean, if you can master the art of opening a conversation, you can deal with rejection. You've nailed it.
And it was just, some of the cringeable techniques that you would apply in those days is that you'd go to a guy, wow, that was an amazing suit. What job do you do to be able to afford a suit like that? And they'd stop and talk to you, or you'd comment this girl on, oh my God, your hair looks amazing. Have you got 2 minutes? And, these old fashioned sort of, just trying to be nice to people. And just to try and get them to sort of spend 2 minutes of their lunch break to give me their telephone, not their mobile telephone, they weren't around then,
no, of course,
but their telephone number and their address, and I was pretty good at it, and I was tenacious. I had an answer for everything. I could close a meeting, and then I realised that and I begged the guy who I worked for at the time, could you please let me do the sales meetings as well? And they said, look, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Give it a go. And that's where my career started. And within sort of 9 months, Matt, I was probably making more money than the managing director of that particular division, because I'd negotiate a flat rate where you just pay me a 20% commission on any profit that I make. And, I went for the big companies. I sold to the Bank of England. I sold to the Bank of Canada, the National Debt Office. I sold to Burberry's. And these were big ticket sales. And I was claiming a flat rate of 20% of the gross margin on that deal. And it got to a stage when they said, look, we've got to either offer you a full-time job, or we've got to renegotiate the contract with you because we're paying you too much money.
And your response to that?
I'm going to set up and take you on. That was my response. And I remember sitting there in this beautiful big office of Mercury Communications, global brand, and saying, I'm going to create a business, I'm going to take you on head on. And I think they just sort of looked at me and smiled and laughed and sort of said, that's great, Scott, thanks very much. And I did. The following day, I went to a company formation officer and I said, look, I want to create this company. I want to call it Network Europe Telecommunication because it sounds big, it sounds great, it sounds bold. And I did it, and I built that. I got into a niche of inbound call centres, and these allow people to take payments over the telephone. And we created at the time a mainframe software pack that allowed that to happen. And to cut to the chase, I built a hugely successful inbound call centre business that became a national plumbing business, and I sold the business to GE Capital 4 years later.
Beautiful. And that was the first one you sold?
It was,
and then you're so tenacious, you decided, well, I'm going to go and do that again then.
Well, I really cocked up because I took no tax advice, and I sold the business for quite a lot of money, and it wasn't just me. There was 5 of us, remember, as well. So I brought partners on board and so forth, and so it sounds like I did it all on my own. I didn't. I did it with partners, and because I didn't take tax advice at the time, the accountant said, look, if you roll this gain into another business, you could just keep rolling up your tax. So I that suited me. I bought my Porsche car. I bought my car that I wanted. I bought my house, and I did all the things that a 24-year-old guy from Essex wants to do. Yeah. And I set up another business, and that business went on to become a hugely successful company. And that was eventually sold to the Australian government-owned telecoms company, Telstra. And I then went on to roll over another and another. So I'm currently in my 5th company at the moment.
Fantastic. So let's just talk about the one that's, I guess, most relevant. Everyone's hearing about Paddy and Scott's. 2007, you set that business up with your co-founder, Paddy. I don't think Paddy's involved in the business anymore. Is that right?
No. But Paddy played a really integral part at the very beginning. So, and the reason why it's called Paddy and Scott's and not Scott and Paddy is that Paddy actually come up with the idea of roasting coffee in a little deli in our village in Old Surrey, where I lived at the time in Suffolk. And he come to me for some investment. It was $5,000. And rather than me just giving you $5,000, I wanted to create a vehicle to invest this money into. So I created a business, and the formation officer asked me, what do you want to call the business? And I just went Paddy and Scott, until such time as we'd create a name for the business, and then we were going to change the name. But the name stuck, and the business become a global brand now, Paddy and Scott. So you can taste our coffee all around the world now.
Yeah, and we'll dive into that journey in a second. But again, whilst doing due diligence, that you mentioned to somebody else who was interviewing you about a chance happening with a Sunday Times journalist. It sounded like that was quite a pivotal moment in the early days of Paddy and Scott's. What happened then?
Yeah, that was a great interview with the BBC, actually. I remember they sort of said, look, when was that moment when you realised that Paddy and Scott's was going to be more than just a local coffee distribution business? And we were doing a sort of trade fair, a food fair in a local village, and Paddy and I were sitting there, and we were just making coffees for people to sample and talking about our hand roasting and that sort of thing. And we made a coffee for this Sunday Times journalist, who we didn't know was a Sunday Times journalist at the time, and she sort of said, look, guys, this is one of the best coffees I've ever tasted. It was fantastic. And we were laughing and joking, and we were saying, we'll make you another one. And I remember her sort of saying, oh, no, honestly, I'd like to write an article about you two, if that's okay. And then she gave us our card, and she was a food journalist. And it just happened to go into the Sunday Times. And after that, we got a call out of the blue from Waitrose to say, look, would you come and talk to us about a local opportunity? And that turned into a national account. And then, the business was then selling our coffee with Waitrose across the UK. And I think we did that in our first, 18 months of opening. And that's unheard of for a food brand.
That's an amazing, I wouldn't say a piece of luck, because you make your own luck in life. But I suspect then what must have happened is when you're selling into Waitrose, I suspect other supermarkets as well, all of a sudden this is a business that now needs to, forgive the expression, know what it's doing, right? Because I suspect supply chain people within Waitrose are all over you with clipboards and stopwatches. And is that how it works when you're trying to sell with the national supermarkets?
Yeah, it does. And we sort of, if I'm honest with you, we completely overtraded. We committed to everything. I'm a great believer in say yes and worry about it later. Can you support a national rollout? Yeah, of course we can. Can you do national tastings? Yeah, no problems at all. Can you get this coffee shipped by next Thursday? Yeah, you just watch us. And I think I just said yes to everything. And we were okay on cash. The cash was pretty, the cash was good in the business. We were quite well financed by myself. So But we did overtrade, and it did stretch us. And then we got a Tesco's listing as well. So now we're in Tesco's, and now we're in Waitrose, and then it become a bit of a poison chalice, because working with the supermarkets, there's loads of stories about working with supermarkets. If you do your due diligence properly and you set your stall out and you understand the payment plans, then a supermarket can revolutionize your business. But if you get it wrong, they can really drain your resources and your cash flow. And the margins are quite tight, as we all know, dealing with the supermarkets and food. So, it was an experience, but 3 years later, we promised never to go into supermarkets again.
Interesting. And that's one of the great things about you and your brand is you dictate terms, not the other way around, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have no external shareholders. We have no debt. We have no one to answer to apart from one shareholder, who is me. And I have a brilliant team that runs that business that do a far better job than I can do. So yeah, there's a swagger of arrogance, really.
Yeah.
I'd call it confidence, not arrogance, but
Sure.
confidence in our own ability to not need the supermarkets to distribute our coffee. And we took another route, and that route's proven to be equally, if not more, successful.
Yeah, so that other route, of course, is, and I'm going to encourage people to go and take a look on YouTube at one video specifically on your YouTube channel, which describes the story. But 2012, you set out to buy a coffee farm, right? And it didn't quite go the way it planned on the first few trips, because I think you had a few risky moments.
Yeah, so let's look at our supply chain, Matt, and let's see if we can go up our supply chain. I'm a great believer in, do you know your supplier's supplier? And certainly in an ESG-led world, corporate social responsibility, you need to understand your supplier. And we knew our coffee was coming in through different brokers, and that coffee was being traded on the world market, and the hedge fund managers were applying their fees. And so we thought, well, why don't we just go direct to source now? Coffee has grown around the world. It's grown around the equator, and Africa is a huge continent that produces many, many tons of coffee, as well as Brazil and Asia and so forth. And these aren't places like, you're not doing business in a beautiful office in Paris or Milan. You're standing in the middle of a field in Bogota, in Colombia, and there are other crops that are being grown around you that
Yes.
may be more profitable. And the coffee farmers are looking around and talking in hushed tones to make sure that, and we ended up in Somalia, talking to a Somalian farmer, and I sensed that we were going to be kidnapped if we carried on talking. And
Really?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And we had on our first trip to Africa, we had armed guards that would look after us, and they didn't sound great to these two guys that we hired. They were I think they were special forces. You never know, because they don't say a word, but they just stare at you.
They looked it.
They looked like they were special forces. These two, we certainly paid enough money, and I'm sure there was a gun somewhere in their pockets. But they just sort of, just hung around the background while we were negotiating. We ended up in Kenya, and we met a family, and the family were a third generation coffee farmers, and sadly the father had just had a stroke, actually, and the son was taking over the business, and it was a tiny little farm, and we ended up, spending a few days with them, and we broke bread, and we understood what we were going to do, and then we set out to revolutionise the Machomba farm, and now the Machomba farm is probably one of the best farming projects in the world when it comes to sustainable coffee, and that's not just me saying that, Matt. That was actually endorsed by the International Trade Centre, which is an NGO and part of the United Nations. And they spent 3 months out in East Africa looking at the project, and wrote a beautiful white paper report that goes into the Fair Trade 2.0. And so it's had a massive impact on hundreds, if not thousands of people now in East Africa.
I definitely encourage anybody who's listening, when you get to the end of the podcast, just go on YouTube. It's only 6 or 7 minutes, but it's 6 or 7 minutes of your life that you won't want back, because it's a really great story. And I think the other thing that you haven't alluded to, but we have to, is the fact that you, not only have you shortened the supply chain for the farmer so they're getting more cash for their crop, you're actually ploughing so much more of that money and supporting them into the community, the wider community as well. So you're also in there with the school, is that right?
Yeah. So we looked at the whole supply chain, and we also looked at the way that people were living in the community, and you can't learn if you don't have food in your belly, and parents don't work hard if they know their children are not going to a proper school. So we decided to address those issues as well. So There's the Ryuga school, which is adjacent to the farm in Meru in Kenya, which is about 300 miles northeast of Nairobi, and we saw how we loosely call it a school, but it was a series of tin huts and no sanitation or running water or anything like that, and we pretty much effectively rebuilt the whole school, and now it's a primary and secondary school for 526 children. And we fund most of the school meals, the teachers' wages, and we provide places for children that can't afford to go to the school through the sale of the coffee that is now grown on the farm through a project to teach the children better farming methods and to use less pesticides, less water. So it's just one of those beautiful circular projects that is the envy of the world. And I say that sincerely as well.
Yeah, that's a true circular economy right there, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
So let's move things on, because the interesting thing is when you look at Paddy and Scott's and you don't know all of that wonderful backstory, you've got a handful of coffee shops as well, which I don't know if that's still going to continue to grow? Are you looking to, is it world domination? Starbucks, look out, here we come. We're going to be on every high street.
No, not at all, really. The reason why we sort of went into coffee shops, not because we wanted to look at it as a revenue stream, but we work with companies. So we work with the likes of Marriott International, we work with Green King and so forth, and we probably have it's difficult to say, but quite a few dozen sort of branded franchises within these brilliant organisations, and you can't sell the concept of a professional craft coffee shop if you don't know how to do it. So we set up 3 of our own coffee shops really as test beds to be able to try different techniques, different products, different ways of making coffee, serving customers, different food pairings, and so forth. So and that's become a really cool part of our business now. And what started off as just a training centre has turned into a pretty cool coffee shops. And but no, we have no intention of competing with the clients that we supply coffee to. No.
Sure. But and there's also embedded within there is a barista academy as well, isn't there? So and I remember on that podcast I listened to, you missed one out. You said there are 2 things that if you can do, you'll always be able to turn a dime and earn money. One is cut hair, the other is make great coffee. The third one is obviously to sell something.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If you can be good at selling, you'll be okay. But you're actually teaching that you take baristas through a really very intensive academy program, right?
Yeah, we do, and this is sort of something that our Antipodean sort of cousins were, way ahead of the UK market. And we think of Costa and Starbucks as really driving the craft coffee market, the new wave coffee. But it's the coffee shops of Melbourne and so forth, and those were the guys that really grasped coffee and being a barista as a career. And some of these Instagram stars baristas that train and they're endorsed by coffee manufacturers and so forth. They're earning sort of $70,000-$80,000 a year making coffee, and they bring their clients with them. And so being a barista, a qualified professional barista, is a plausible career now, and it's a career that we help people to embark on. So yeah, I mean, anybody that has the wings on their door when they walk in would have gone through that training program and be very proud to serve the coffee that we produce.
Love it. Let's move the story on, because I want to unpack a little bit of wisdom for the listener before I let you go. And so what was quite interesting, I think this is a first, Scott, if I'm honest with you. So you're an angel investor in a company, but you're also the sales director there. And this is a company called Quench, which I believe is a family business. Is that right?
Yeah. So the Quench is my son's company. Henry's 24. Probably one of the most dynamic guys, and also the most awkward guys I've ever had to work with. And when things get tight, he just looks at me and he says, "Dad, just don't be an idiot." And how do you answer that? So you fire back and you wait till Mum. I tell Mum of you.
So you've got some skin in the game as an investor there, but you're also, in fact, he's in charge of you because he's the CEO, yeah?
Yeah, I report to my son, who's the chief exec of Quench, and when we have a board meeting, and I have to report to my son. Yeah, it's a strange one.
Oh, you're hitting your targets. How many calls did you make?
Yeah, yeah,
What's your conversion
yeah. Can
rate?
you close the deal, Dad? But he's got. I mean, Henry's got an amazing business there. I mean, some of the clients that they work with, and they're a commercial e-com business that drives sales through the integration of video, and
Mm.
and it's just amazing that the clients they've worked with, Marriott, they've done work for Apple. They were filming the new iPhone video. He's done work out in Venezuela, Los Angeles. I mean, the team and what they create is just a whole new wave of young entrepreneurs coming through, and they're all young, Matt. They all look
I know.
about 10 years old, and
Yeah.
they're just super smart kids that talk a language that I struggle a little bit to actually understand what they're going on about, but I
No, I love
understand.
it.
I can read a balance sheet, and I can look at a P&L, and I can sixth sense. But yeah, it's a new wave of selling. It's a new wave of you're not closing a deal. What you're doing is you're just you're charging. Your people are buying from you.
Yeah.
They feel proud of the fact that they're getting a product produced by Quench, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
So again, check. It's Quench London, I think, is where you
It is
find them
absolutely.
on Google. But what I love about that branding, and obviously I saw an element of that within the work he did for you on the video in Paddy and Scott. It's really edgy stuff, and that's so appealing and engaging and interesting. And it's just totally. If you sound like everybody else, guess what's going to happen to you? We're going to have a chat about price. Well, let's get off that. Let's be completely different. And I think it's definitely what I see in Paddy and Scott's. It's definitely what I see in your son's business as well. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think sort of the edginess sometimes pushes boundaries that we wouldn't be brave enough to do on our own. And some of the videos, I mean, we call them bankers, but the spelling was wrong. And when you see that flashed across the screen to make a point of, so it was just you cringe and think, oh my gosh, can we get away with that? But yeah, we do. And
Yeah.
the impact is not measured in tens of thousands, but tens of millions of views. And I think that I don't even know how many hundreds of millions of views and minutes that are watched across our social channels now. But I think we still have the number one global watched YouTube video on barista training, and the farm videos that show the project at the Maru farm are just amazing figures, and it's a sight to behold. Yeah, I feel incredibly proud.
So the theme on the Sales Cadence podcast, Scott, is whenever I bring a guest on, then my job is to wring out as much wisdom as possible. I normally only ask someone to come on with 2 or 3 pieces of advice. I haven't primed you in advance of this. You've come onto this, hats off to you, completely cold. But knowing what I know about you, I know you'll have no problem with this, because I'm actually going to ask you some questions about something you wrote yourself. About a couple of years ago, you put a post out on LinkedIn about turning 50, and I think you put about 12 or 15 pieces of advice to your son.
I did.
Yeah,
Yeah, that got amazing traction.
that
Didn't
got
it? I
some
mean, how
shitloads
many?
of views, mate. I'm
Oh,
telling you, yeah,
Christ!
thousands of
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And even the comments were into the thousands. I think that was a.
No, okay, no. Look, what I want to do is, and respecting it's a personal post, and it's designed obviously for advice for your son. I'm going to just flip that and say, well, I think there's some advice in there for anybody, and so I'm going to take the listener through most of the points, not all of them, and just turn it back to you on 1 or 2 of them, and ask you just to give me a bit more background behind them. So,
And I don't have this in front of
no,
me,
you
Matt.
don't.
So I
I'm sure
know
you
the
don't.
post. So you're just gonna have to lead me down whatever alleyway you want me to walk down here.
So, dozen pieces of advice to the son. Number one is I've now worked for myself for 30 years continuously, but haven't worked a single day in my life. That's because I love what I do. I don't think we need to explain that. I think the last 32 minutes is pretty much, if you haven't got this, listener, this is somebody who effectively lives and breathes passion. Is that a fair response?
Yeah, look, I do. I wake up every morning and I go for a run, and I'm the happy, I'm the luckiest guy alive, because I've never had a boss. I've never had someone telling me what to do, and I cut my own jib, and I sail my own course. And imagine waking up every morning and running your life like that. And I suppose, yeah, I'm a blessed guy.
Number two, I'm now happy playing football at the back. and letting you score the goals. Now, I read that and I thought that's a metaphor for leadership in business.
Yeah, look, it's great. You'd only have to if you follow Paddy and Scott's, we have a really dynamic management team there. And we have Zoe Hill, who's our operations director, and our chief exec is a chap called Jonathan Reed. And if you look at some of the posts that Jonathan Reed puts out there, they are just brilliant. And I look at them, I think, wow, what an amazing post. And I'm happy. I like that. If my chief exec is as passionate about that and he's putting these brilliant posts out there that are embedded with positivity that permeates through the company that he's the head of, then to me, that's a goal. I'm sitting back in defence. I'm puffing away because I've run my 60 yards, but let him score the goal or let her score the goal, and I sit back with immense pride.
Fantastic. And so much of business, of course, is there are 11 of us playing football here. If I can't play in every position, I'll just go out and find the right people in those right positions, yeah?
And I think just very on that, I mean, you're a professional coach as well, Matt. So you know this, but the problem with entrepreneurs, they want to try and do everything themselves, and they get themselves into a muddle because they feel that no one can do it as good as them, and and their way that they teach people is by saying that's rubbish and you should do it like me, and that's not how you manage and motivate and drive a successful team. So the football analogy I think was something that I know would have resonated with my four sons.
Do you see that much in your world of professional coaching with your clients? Do you see a lot of entrepreneurs really struggling to let go?
Yeah, I do a lot actually, and I think sometimes they're worried that the team would do it better than them, and then they'll lose credibility. And I think that is something that's an inherent fear of entrepreneurs, because you do fear the unknown. You fear, what if people realise that I'm not as good as what I say I am? And that's not the case. It doesn't happen. And this imposter syndrome, I'm well versed and critiqued over the fact that I just don't agree with it. You're there because you deserve to be there. It's not lonely at the top. The view is brilliant. The view is fantastic. You get a 360 degrees view of what's going on, and you can deal with that.
Yeah.
If you're finding it lonely at the top or scary at the top, then ask the question: should you be at the top?
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Number 7, your reputation is what other people say about you. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I drive this a lot, and the reputation isn't what you say. It isn't what you put out there into the ether. Your reputation is what other people say about you. So I get an amazing sense of pride when we receive amazing views on our reviews on our TripAdvisor and Trustpilot and so forth. But what I love, Matt, is that when you do get the occasional negative review, and as opposed to us responding back and saying, well, why are you not happy? What I love is the fact that this army of supporters that will come back on our behalf and say, oh my gosh, I just don't agree with that. Paddy and Scott's are doing this, Paddy and Scott's doing that. And it just sends me into a ripple of just amazing to think that we don't have to protect ourselves, because, there are far more people out there to respond back to any negative posts.
Yeah.
Than we have to deal with, and that is reputation. That's a true mark of a reputable, reputation-centric business.
Love it. And funny enough, I was recording a podcast with somebody yesterday, and I asked him to give me some insights in some of the quotes that resonated with him. And you hear this a lot at the moment, Scott, from Alex Hormozi. And if anyone follows the Modern Wisdom podcast, you'll hear it as well. But the quote that is, you don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. I think that's a really great quote, isn't it? Because
it
just
is
point over there, and if you can see a whole bunch of stuff that we've done, and that's not trying to create some kind of look at us, we're fantastic. It just allows you to say, yeah, we're doing it okay. It's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and you bang on, and there is a tendency to say, to have a brand and to slap a massive big logo on everything and scream, look how good we are. Look, this center of massive big. And I always use the analogy of an iPhone. If you look at an iPhone, you use an iPhone because you want to use an iPhone. And if you look at the back, there's a tiny weeny little logo that just has an image of an apple. And you're just thinking, because it's Apple, you don't need to.
Yeah.
You don't need to scream from the rooftops, look, because what that's doing, it's masking the fact that you're not confident in your own ability to deliver a product and service that people want to buy. So, going back to the original question, your reputation is not about your logo. It's not about what you say. It's about what people say about you. And I think that's a good lesson for my boys to learn, actually.
Love it. So you've already mentioned it on earlier on in the podcast anyway, but point number 8 to your son was just say yes, worry about how you'll do it later. So if that's not authentic, I don't know what is. But has that ever got you into trouble, Scott?
Yeah, massively with Waitrose. I completely overpromised and under-delivered. So yeah, we covered that earlier on. It's funny. I've been in with meetings with people, and I know when I've taken my colleagues along sometimes, they're super prepared. They've planned it, and they've worked out the numbers. They've made sure that everything is aligned, and they're worried that the client may ask them a question they don't know the answer to. And I'm just sort of, don't worry about it. Just walk straight in. It doesn't matter. Anything that you don't know, just say, give me 10 minutes, I'll come back to you. Don't preempt a battle when there isn't going to be a battle there. So, I'm a great believer in, just say yes and then worry about how you're going to deliver it afterwards. And if the shit hits the fan and you can't do it, you say, really sorry, guys, we can't do it, but we can do this. And what are they going to do? Throw the towel at you? Of course they're not going to do that. But I suppose that comes from 30 years of experience, Matt, and not really worrying whether clients want to work with you or not. If they do, that's brilliant. If we're not right for them, then that's cool as well. No problems at all. We're quite happily, we probably turn down more people that want to work with Paddy and Scott than we take on. That isn't swagger. That's because we're probably, we may be not just not right for them, and maybe it's good to say, look, there's probably a cheaper supplier down the road. They'll do a job, and go with those guys.
We had a bit of fun, didn't we, earlier on, talking about some of those old 1980s sales techniques where you were OPCing it. But number 9 and number 12 brings us right up into the world of modern effective selling, which is number 9 was a smile will always help you close a deal, and number 12 is helping others feels great. If they aren't two brilliant piece of advice for anyone in sales today, I don't know what is.
Yeah, look, you've got to love your job, and it's very difficult to not smile when you're doing something you love. And if you try to fake a smile, it comes over as sinister. You start grimacing, and you start, and it's not a natural thing to do. So a good salesperson will genuinely enjoy the interaction. They'll enjoy the human connection of selling. And remember, selling is an ancient thing that goes back many thousands of years. Fundamentally, somebody wants to buy and somebody wants to sell. So there's a coalition of the willing before you even start a conversation. And a lot of salespeople forget that. Nobody these days will spend any time and effort if they're not genuinely interested in the product and service that you want to deliver. So if you've got that time, enjoy that time and smile and be empathetic and listen and understand what this product will do to help their company, not the other way around. Because if you're not authentic, you're just going to try and sell something that helps you, and a client can see that a mile off. They can smell that a mile off.
I'm going to steal that last point you just made there, which is selling is a coalition of the willing. That is profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And people forget that, don't we? You remember it goes back thousands of years. This isn't new. This isn't something you've got to force. It isn't, I'm proud to call myself a salesperson. That's what I do. I trade in the ancient art of the supply of goods, and, long may that continue.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, last couple. Number 13, sometimes it's best to say nothing and let people think you're a fool than to open your mouth and confirm the fact. You've got to be pretty comfortable in your own skin to be able to adopt that approach, I'd have thought.
I think I stole that from someone far more clever than I did, actually. So of all my quotes I put out there, I think I plagiarised that one slightly. But yeah, so many people, you see them sitting in a meeting and they feel they've got to say something and they've got to make a comment. And, you cringe because you think, it's rhetorical. You don't need to say that. The deal is that the client wants to buy from you. So just let it naturally, follow its course. don't try to put your foot in the door and refuse to, and it's just, I see it often with, in sales techniques. And it does make me smile. Less is more sometimes when you're selling.
There's also another play on that as well, which is better to be an idiot for 5 minutes and ask the question than don't and be a fool for the rest of your life. So it works. It works in whichever way you sell out. Last one then, which I love. Success is not measured by cash in your wallet, but stamps in your passport.
Yeah, do you know what? I love that one. And I remember we were talking about the places that you travelled, and I was sitting with my boys actually on a plane, and we were going through all the stamps in my passport. And my passport was full up. There was no more stamps available. I had one more page. And I had a North Korean stamp in my passport, of all places. And I think my little lad at the time, Henry, said to me, Dad, that's the mark of success, isn't it? And I thought about that, and I thought the mark of success. Yeah, do you know what that is? Because, if you are going to spend your life doing something that you love, i.e. making money and selling, then if you don't use that money and put it into good use, then why are you doing it? And travelling to me is something that I enjoy, and I do very often. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good indication. And I'm also an honorary fellow at the University of Suffolk. And when I was given my honorary degree and I stood up in front of the graduates, I used that term. And I think it was delivered in a way that you could have heard a pin drop in that room, with the amount of passion and energy and new beginnings that were going to permeate from that ceremony. And to look at them and just say, look, guys, it's not about the size of your wallet. Success isn't measured on that. And that was lovely.
So I'm going to wrap up with just a few really super quick fire questions. Before I do, where should the listeners go to get more of the Paddy and Scott's love?
Well, you just Google it. Just Google Paddy and Scott's. And if I was you, I'd definitely go into the YouTube channels and look at some of the data there. And the story is amazing. So follow the farm project in East Africa, and then you'll get a great insight into the school project and the coffee farm that we've created at the school, which is a model working farm, and we're teaching these children these new modern farming techniques. And as I said earlier on, it's to try to encourage a new variety of coffees now that use less water, less pesticides, and these techniques are being taught in schools, and that knowledge base is being shared not only in Africa but with farmers that we're working with in Brazil as well. So there's some really beautiful stuff there, and very humanitarian based business, which is good to be part of.
And of the many plates that you're spinning, that obviously you and I are aligned with a coaching business, BGCN, Business Growth Coaches Network. I suspect you're pretty rammed when it comes to private clients in there, but I would suggest the listener just go over to bgcn.co.uk. If you've got a business issue, you're looking for some kind of advice or guidance, then maybe there's someone in that portfolio of coaches that can help you. And who knows, you may get lucky. You might even get to spend some time with Scott.
On that note,
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant point to raise, and I really do. And I always sort of challenged whether business coaching or mentoring was really a worthwhile thing to do, and I've completely bought into the concept. And I had a coach for a year, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I encourage any business owner, entrepreneur, intrapreneur, pre-seed, post-seed, get yourself a really good independent business coach or mentor, and it's the best money you'll ever spend. And that isn't a plug for the BGCN network. It really is. I think in this day and age, business is so complex, you couldn't know everything. And a lot of these coaches have got many years of boardroom experience and growth experience and sales experience, customer retention, HR, and all of this is available for you at not a great deal of money. So yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think that's a really good point. Well made there.
Quick fire. So wherever possible, single answers. Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Flat white or macchiato?
Oh, neither.
You don't like a macchiato?
No, I'm an espresso. I don't drink milk, so I would go for a double espresso.
Elon Musk or Richard Branson?
Richard Branson.
Upton Park or the London Stadium?
I'd say Upton Park, actually.
You're a West Ham fan, right?
Of course I am, and I grew up in that area, and West Ham was, and I'm still a massive supporter now. But that did, because I do love the London Stadium as well. But no, Upton Park definitely.
This one's going to challenge you, I think. Ed Sheeran or George Michael?
Ed Sheeran. I think he's brilliant, Ed. I really do. And I haven't. I think I'm the only. He lives down the road. His house is literally, within walking distance where I live. And I've never seen the guy. I think I'm the only person in Suffolk who's never seen the guy in the flesh. And I know that's not a one answer question, but one day maybe I'll get to meet the brilliant Ed Sheeran.
Number 5, probably more than one word answer, but as succinct as possible. Biggest sales mistake you see out there today?
Not listening to what the client wants. And I know that sounds obvious, but whatever you're selling is it has to be right for the client, not the other way around. So it's listening and not talking. I think years ago, a sales manager said to me, you've got 2 ears, Scott, and 1 mouth. That's the key. That's the clue.
Other than yourself, who holds you accountable?
I'd say my senior management team certainly hold me accountable for my actions, and they certainly clip my wings if I'm out there promising things that they can't deliver. And I will take that in a positive way, and I won't take offence to that, even though I own the business. I will listen to people, and I will learn from other people as well.
Best sale you ever closed? So it doesn't have to be monetary wise or whatever it is, but the one that you thought, yeah, I remember that one.
A few more questions, but it's such a brilliant answer. I hope I'll inspire people. But I did sell as a young apprentice, a young OPC, to the Bank of England, and I made out I was from BT because they were digging the road up outside, and I just walked in and just sort of said, "Hi, I'm from BT, and I just want to say I'm really sorry about the noise." And they went mad. I said, "Oh, thank you very much," and sit down. And I was eventually sort of entered into the comms room, and they entered in. And anyway, I wasn't from BT, but I had to then say, "Look, I'm not really from BT, but I just wanted to apologise." And they didn't throw me out, but they did say, "Do you have a contact at BT?" And I said yes, and I got the deal. So that was one of those things. Say one thing and worry about what the consequences are afterwards.
Fabulous. Last 2. Is there one quote on the wall that you have somewhere in your house, or a mantra that resonates with you most?
I suppose it's from my children's school crest, that's Sic Parvis Magna, which I think stands great things from small beginnings. And I think that sits with me. So I'm a great believer in growing things into big things. So that probably resonates with me.
So you've been incredibly helpful and candid with the wisdom that you shared on this podcast. The last one, really, I'm going to ask you to dig deep and try and find something that perhaps you haven't mentioned. Or if you have, then we'll do that one again. But one piece of sales advice that you swear by.
You have to believe in the product that you're selling. I don't care what that is. And you have to genuinely, would you buy that product? Would you buy that service? And if you wouldn't buy that service yourself, then how can you expect other people to buy that? So I think that I have to really believe in something. And I always think, would you sell it to your mum and dad? And if you say yes, then that's good enough for me.
Scott Russell, fantastic way to end the podcast. Thank you for carving out the time. And listen, everybody's in sales, we're all selling something. Scott, you are selling like so much stuff, it's unbelievable, but you're doing it the right way. And people who've listened to this podcast will no doubtly agree. So thank you very much for joining me.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Matt, and always good to catch up. So thank you for your time too.
Folks, there's a famous saying, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I've always been searching for some practical examples of how you feel when you meet somebody. And I think I've just found it. It was a truly inspiring conversation with Scott. If you're anything like me, you'll leave this episode feeling inspired, motivated, and above all else, sort of content really that there are people like Scott in the world and others who are truly helping people with the products that they sell. But I mean truly helping people. Fascinating conversation. What's going on in the world of Sales Cadence? Folks, if you are struggling to close leads, so if your marketing is producing leads for you, having conversations with people, but those conversations aren't really going anywhere or they're not going in the direction that you want to, i.e. to turn those leads and those conversations into sales, then I can help you. The So the Leads to Sales half-day workshop is back. We're running it in January 2024. It'll be in person. It'll be in Norwich in the UK. So this might be for you. So head over to the website, salescadence.co.uk, jump on the training page. You'll find all the details there. Folks, that's it. Until the next episode, whatever you're doing this Christmas, whoever you're spending it with, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. There's still a few days left though, folks. For those hardcore sellers out there, remember, everybody's in sales, we're all selling something. So if you do have a few days left and you haven't downed tools yet, wish you huge success with that. Happy selling. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Sales Cadence podcast.